5 bookkeeper interview questions all small business owners should use. The first question I think that you should ask in any interview with any bookkeeper is, why do you want to be a bookkeeper? Find out if they even have an understanding of that. I think especially, or maybe instead of using the word especially, I should say perhaps more so than in many other professions, the bookkeeping profession does have a certain amount of people who go out there and they attempt to do bookkeeping because they think it's going to be easy. I've seen it firsthand as somebody who trains bookkeepers, that you have a lot of bookkeepers out there who bought QuickBooks and, figured out how to fill out the forms, and they think, okay, I can do bookkeeping now. So you want to kind of weed those out, because those aren't the people who are going to be really passionate about being a bookkeeper and doing bookkeeping. So that should be the first question I would ask somebody if I were a small business owner hiring my own bookkeeper is, why do you want to be a bookkeeper? And the answer should be interesting, but look for the passion. Look for somebody who is passionate about doing bookkeeping, not somebody who's just doing it because they think it's going to be an easy job. The second question I think you should ask them kind of comes right off the heels of that one. So start off with, why do you want to be a bookkeeper? And then get more specific and say, and why bookkeeping for this profession? What is it about my particular industry that you really love? They should have an opinion about that. There should be something about that that they can express to you in terms of why they're not just passionate about bookkeeping, but passionate specifically about doing bookkeeping in your industry. So it might be that your particular industry has some nuances in the bookkeeping that they find interesting, whatever it might be. Or maybe they're passionate about bookkeeping for your industry specifically because it's simple, right? And it's easy to keep it simple, and it's easy to keep things processed efficiently that way. There could be any number of answers. There's no clear black and white right or wrong here, but the answer should interest you in terms of convincing you that they're not just passionate about being a bookkeeper, but that they're specifically passionate about bookkeeping for your particular industry. The next question, the third question I would ask is, you give them a scenario and say, okay, so it's your first day on the job, we've gotten the paperwork out of the way, and I just sat you down in front of our accounting software. What's the first thing you're going to do? And don't lead them, don't make any suggestions, just ask them open-endedly, point blank, what's the first thing you do the first time I sit you in front of our accounting software? And hopefully, they might get nervous and stumble a little bit, and that's normal, so don't judge them based on that. But hopefully the answer that they get to, certainly if they get you the answer that I've laid out here, I would suggest that they're much more inclined to be a keeper at that point, is it should be something along the lines of wanting to review your balance sheet and profit and loss. Because as a bookkeeper, they should want to get a sense of whether or not the books are accurate, how accurate they are, and how much work is involved for them to get the books up to speed in terms of having those books in a place where they, as the bookkeeper, feel confident that the numbers, that the reports, which are the ultimate output of their work, are going to be accurate. And that's exactly the other sort of tangent piece to this, is that the bookkeeper should understand that ultimately the output of their work are the financial statements, that the work that they're doing as the bookkeeper is going to drive what's on the balance sheet and what's on the profit and loss. And a really good bookkeeper should understand those things. And so you don't want to lead them to the answer, but again, you want to ask them, what's the first thing you would do when I first sit you down in front of our accounting software? And the answer should be something along the lines of wanting to do some sort of a review. A perfect answer, and this is my opinion, of course, there's no real right or wrong, but in my opinion, if the bookkeeper came back to me and said, I'd immediately review the balance sheet and start determining if the bank recs are accurate, and probably want to work with you as the owner of the company to look at the receivables and just make sure everything's accurate, that's a keeper. If they give you an answer along those lines, then they're probably somebody you definitely want to hire. Now, the next question I'd ask them, and it kind of goes, again, on the heels of the previous, is, so now they've given you whatever answer they've given you, and you know that one of the primary functions of a bookkeeper each month is to complete the reconciliations, which, in case some of you watching this don't know exactly what that means, it's where we literally compare what's on the bank statement with what's in your accounting system, and we check off transactions one by one as we've confirmed that they cleared the bank account. It's the one sure way, the only sure way that you have of determining that everything that's on the book should be there. And also it has a way of flushing out the things that might be on the books that shouldn't be. Almost all of your transactions ultimately, all roads lead eventually to the bank account. Even the stuff I charge on credit cards, eventually there's a payment from the bank account to the credit card to pay off that credit card's balance. So real important that the bank accounts are accurate first and foremost, and they're right at the top of the balance sheet. So the question that I'm getting at that I would ask the bookkeeper along those lines is, what do you do if your bank rec is off by just a small amount? Now, that is a little bit of a leading question because it might have them believe that you want them to say that you wouldn't waste your time, they wouldn't waste your time hunting around for small amounts. But the reality is the right answer, again, this is all my opinion only, is that there should be zero tolerance for any differences on reconciliations. And I tell the story, and it's a true story. I was actually at a client years ago where I had a $100 difference, and the client was kind of looking over my shoulder, wondering, they could see that I was stuck on something, and they asked me, hey, what's going on? And I said, I'm off by $100, I can't find it. And the client said, just push it through, it's only $100. And I said, no, you know what? I said, give me another 30 minutes with this. If I end up not finding the answer, then I won't bill you for the time. Those days I was still charging by the hour. But I said, I'm determined to find the difference, and I think I'll be able to explain why this is so important, but first I need to find the difference so I can kind of provide you with the proof of why it's important. And sure enough, by the end of my hunt, because here's the bottom line, if I have the right beginning balance, and there's a difference now that I've reconciled, it's in there. It has to be able to be found. It's not impossible. And these days, more so than ever before, the technology's there that I can find it usually inside of 5 minutes, because I can go onto the bank account, download what's called a CSV file, which can be opened in Excel. I can quickly sort by the amount. In my accounting software, I don't care what you're using, in that BankRec screen, you can always sort by the amount there, and I can quickly then compare to see what's missing or where I might be off. So I can always find the difference. And to me, it's so important because what I'm left with when I know that I've been that thorough about reconciliation is an important position from which I can operate. It's a reliance that I can place on the fact that the books have been reconciled without exception, without a single plugged number. It means that I have absolute assurance that I've accounted for everything that went through the bank account. So going back to the client, sure enough, I found eventually that there was a deposit for $10,000 that was missing, represented income that was left off the books, or a reduction in accounts receivable, depending on how it might have been posted. And then I found a check totally unrelated to that income for $9,900. So the absolute value of the misstatement of their financial statements was almost $20,000. That's significant compared to $100. I think most people would agree. So the client, from that point forward, never questioned my wanting to go hunting around and making sure that I found every difference. What looks like a small difference of only $100 can actually be very significant. And as I say in the write-up, leave materiality and questions along those lines up to the auditors. As the bookkeeper, we should be thorough, and there should never be a difference. You can always find it, and you can always fix it. So ask them what they would do if the BankRec is off by even a small amount. Hopefully you'll get an answer along the zero tolerance lines. If they don't give you an answer along those lines, don't write them off. They may still be very good bookkeepers. The bottom line is you can establish that as your policy and say, I know you like to adjust small differences because you don't feel it's worth the time, but our policy here is zero tolerance on reconciling differences. That's the only way that we know for sure that nothing can possibly be missing from the books. And finally, the last question I would ask would relate to, or just the last of the sort of top, I would ask more than 5 questions in most cases. But I would ask a question along the lines of something totally unrelated to bookkeeping itself. And this is the point I was referring to at the beginning that I wanted to make. At the end of the day, skills can be taught. I can teach a lot of people how to become a great bookkeeper, in terms of the skills. What you can't teach is a personality. And I think the last question is aimed at getting, to the bottom of that. Is this person going to be a good fit for your team? Is their personality a match? Because by the time somebody gets to the interview, I'd say most people, probably all the people who've gotten to that point, have the basic skills needed to do the job. Now it's really more of a question of whether or not they're going to be a good fit. And a while back, I asked somebody whom I had seen was very successful. Consistently, everybody he hired was great. They were very energetic and very passionate about what they were doing. And I said, I can't imagine how you are able to just find people who are so passionate about what you do as a company. And because what they did as a company, and I'm not going to get into the specifics, but what they did as a company in and of itself wasn't necessarily the most exciting thing in the world, but they had a way of making it exciting. And his answer to me was very interesting and very eye-opening to me. He said to me, Seth, I look for people who are passionate, period. As long as they're passionate about something, they can get passionate about this. And so that brings us to what my last question is, and he told me that this is the question he asks a lot of the people that he interviews. And he says, describe the most recent thing in your personal life that you did that you were really passionate about. And what we're looking for here is we're looking for balance. We're looking for interests that they have outside of the workplace that show that they that they have those interests, that they are passionate about things. And where this comes from, and what I had noticed about this guy's company, is that one, I had gotten to know a lot of the people in his company because they were interesting, and they were very energetic, very warm and friendly, and fun to be around, frankly. And then I noticed something else, though, as I observed what was it about them that made them stand out to me so much. And the answer, as I looked at each individual person, was that there was something about that person that I could point to that I knew about their personal lives in terms of something they were passionate about. And it wasn't by coincidence, apparently. But I didn't notice it consciously at first. And I could tell you this one person at their company is really into bodybuilding. She and her boyfriend or husband, they're always at the gym working out. They're what we call gym rats, right? Another one loves the mountains, loves the outdoors. I can see that very clearly from when I talk to her and also from things that I see that, they post on Facebook and whatnot. Another one that I became friendly with at this company was an actress. That was her thing that she was passionate about outside of the workplace. So everybody has something that they're interested in, hopefully, outside of the workplace. And I think that what he tapped into there is that he found people that he hired who had these interests outside of the workplace, which meant that they had passion, they had energy for something, and that energy can usually be converted into energy for what they're doing. But more importantly, it meant they had balance. It meant they had something to live for outside of the workplace. And as we all probably know, I'm pretty sure most, if not all of you, would agree with me when I say this, what you don't want is you don't want workaholics, because workaholics are going to get burnt out and they're going to get resentful and they're going to be unhappy for the most part. You want well-balanced people who are really passionate and energetic about what they're doing, because then they're going to be passionate and energetic about what they're doing for you. That, my friends, are 5 bookkeeper interview questions all business owners should use.